So you're interested in knowing the difference between living in Toronto versus living in Hamilton. Well, as someone who's lived in Toronto for over 20 years and who lived in Hamilton for over 5 years, I'm going to break down the complete difference between living in both cities. We're going to touch on affordability, cost of living, entertainment and amenities, education and childcare, neighborhoods, and so much more. And be sure to stay tuned till the end because I'm going to mention some top secrets that a lot of people probably don't want you to know about both cities. Stay tuned. My name's Tish Schoberg and I'm a licensed real estate agent in Ontario, Canada. And if you're thinking of moving to Toronto, Hamilton, or any of the surrounding areas, be sure to reach out. I'd love to help. I get inquiries all the time from people just like you looking to move to the area, and it's always a pleasure to answer any of your questions and to help out with your home buying or selling needs. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, turn on post notifications so you can be updated on everything living in Toronto, living in Hamilton, and in surrounding areas. Hamilton is an incredible, fast-growing city with a population of 812,000 people, while Toronto boasts a population size of 2.9 million people. So first I'm going to get into why I decided to move from Toronto to Hamilton. So I lived in Toronto for over 20 years, then decided to move to Mississauga where I lived for 3 years, and then to Hamilton, which is where I currently reside, and I've been here for over 5 years. While I love Toronto in terms of its fast pace, always having something fun to do, and having a ton of family and friends there, I knew that affordability was going to be a key factor as to why I had to move from the area. I just found that I was getting a lot more house for my buck in the Hamilton area, and it was still within a really close distance to Toronto, so I felt that it was more than worth the move. And honestly, I've never looked back. So first we're going to get into affordability. I find real estate prices in Toronto versus Hamilton like night and day. Toronto, the average home price is $1.05 million, while the average price of a home in Hamilton is at $750,000. So that's a significant difference in price point and means that you're getting a lot more home for your dollar in the Hamilton area than in Toronto. I do want to break down the specific examples of what you're getting in terms of detached houses, townhouses, and condos in both areas. So let's get into that now. One thing to keep in mind for both cities is that price points for homes definitely differ based on the area. So in Toronto, we have a community called Scarborough where price points are a little bit more affordable. And there's areas such as Forest Hill in Toronto where price points are a lot higher. And then in Hamilton, we have the central downtown core where home prices are a lot more affordable in comparison to the more luxury area of Ancaster where prices are a little bit more higher. So definitely there is a difference between price points in different areas in each city that you definitely want to consider. Another thing to keep in mind is that Toronto has a lot of condos, a ton, and they actually have a lot of new builds that are coming up as well, especially in the downtown area. Whereas Hamilton, I always say this joke, Hamilton has like a non-existent condo market. Like there is not a lot of condos in Hamilton. So a lot of the renters actually tend to rent out basements or rent out like rooms or a specific section of multi-residential homes. So that's one of the big things. So if you're really big on condos, you can definitely find a few in Hamilton, but you're going to have a lot more choices in Toronto. Another thing to keep in mind is if you're saving up for your first home or your next home or saving up to downsize, you're definitely going to find that Hamilton is going to allow you to save up quicker because you're going to have a more affordable housing type than in Toronto. So just something to consider. So based on the 2022 median sold price, detached homes were actually 61% more affordable in Hamilton than Toronto. Towns were 37% more affordable, and condos were 28% more affordable. Next, let's get into cost of living. So the average worker in Toronto makes $4,300 a month, while the average worker in Hamilton makes $3,800 per month. That means that Hamiltonians are making 13% less in terms of wages and salary than Torontonians. So Toronto definitely has more job opportunities than Hamilton. The main difference between both cities is that Toronto has larger clusters of employers that are within a very small distance to one another. So there's a lot more job opportunities that are close by to residential housing, whereas in Hamilton we find a lot of job opportunities that are pretty spread out, and a lot of people tend to commute outside of the Hamilton area, such as in the Kitchener-Waterloo, that's just a thriving tech hub, or they commute to Burlington, Oakville, or Toronto, or Niagara, or Brantford, to neighboring cities to take advantage of the job markets there. So that's kind of the difference between both in terms of job markets. So although Toronto has a lot more job opportunities that might be close to your home, the thing is the traffic in Toronto is a lot worse than Hamilton. There are times that I'm traveling from North York to Etobicoke and it's taking over an hour depending on the time of day, whereas my commute from Toronto to Hamilton is way less than that. So just be sure to factor in the traffic, especially during the times that you're planning on traveling to and from work. So I do find that food prices in Hamilton and Toronto are pretty much the same. I do find that certain areas within Toronto has really posh grocery stores and food markets where pricing might be a little bit more expensive than Hamilton. And that's usually because those stores have higher rents or higher mortgage payments and have to actually charge more for their food prices. And that includes restaurants as well. But both cities have large chain restaurants, large chain grocery stores, like there's Food Basic, Freshco, Costco, No Frills, Metro, both in Toronto and in Hamilton. And those large chain stores tend to not really have much of a difference in price depending on different cities that they're located in. So in terms of transportation, both cities have Uber, they have taxis, Go Transit, and public transit, and there's not much of a difference in price point between transit options. The interesting thing is that the transit cost for an adult fare in Toronto and in Hamilton is actually the same. It's $3.25 for a single fare on public transit. However, the monthly fee for the monthly pass in Toronto is $156 and the monthly pass for Hamilton is $114. So that does make a big difference in terms of the monthly cost, but for a single fare, it's the exact same thing at $3.25, which I found to be really interesting. Next, let's get into entertainment and amenities. Toronto definitely has a ton of things to do. Same with Hamilton. And I do find Toronto has a little bit more options in terms of entertainment. Like their club scene is a lot more livelier than Hamilton, and they definitely have a ton more options for restaurants than in the Hamilton area. But there's a lot of things that are pretty identical. We both have a concert hall. For instance, Toronto has the Scotiabank Arena, also known as the ACC. I still call it the ACC. And Hamilton has the First Ontario Centre, where both host sports events, large concerts, Disney on Ice, and Toronto also has great parks like Scarborough Bluffs. Hamilton has incredible parks like Albion Falls. Both cities have major sports teams. Like, of course, Toronto has the Toronto Raptors. Hamilton is known for their Tiger Cats football team. And there's so many other different things that make both cities such a desirable area to live in. Both cities have movie theaters, farmers market, water parks. So Toronto has Wildwater Kingdom, while Hamilton has Wild Water Works. The thing that makes Hamilton really desirable, though, is that it is very close to the Niagara border. So you can quickly commute to neighboring cities in the US, like Pennsylvania, New York, and do things there a lot easier than if you were to live in Toronto. Plus, there's a ton to do in Niagara itself. Like there's Clifton Hills, there's a huge shopping district there. So both cities have incredible option of things to do. And walk scores for Toronto are at 61, while the walk score for Hamilton is at 50. But there's definitely certain areas within both cities that have higher walk scores, especially the downtown areas. Like in Toronto, I know there's areas with a walk score of 100 out of 100. And the downtown Hamilton area would probably have that large value walk score as well. The public transit score does differ quite a bit. Toronto's public transit score is 78, where Hamilton's public transit score is 45. Next, let's get into education and childcare. So while Toronto has a ton of different school options for post-secondary students, such as Toronto Metropolitan University, formerly known as Ryerson, in the downtown core, U of T, which is also in the downtown core, York University, that's in North York, George Brown College. There's definitely a lot of options also in the Hamilton area. So Hamilton is known for its McMaster University, Mohawk College, and we also have neighboring cities close by, such as Kitchener-Waterloo, that have a ton of different options for schools, and in Brantford as well. And while Toronto has some of the top rated schools in all of Canada, there's definitely a significant difference in terms of tuition and course costs. It's actually substantially more higher than Hamilton. So let's break down the differences here. For instance, a nursing student that's studying at U of T would be paying $8,190 for their program for the year, whereas at McMaster they'd be paying $5,998. An IT student at U of T would be paying $11,420, where at McMaster that same student would be paying $7,980. And at U of T, somebody that's studying science and engineering would be spending $14,180, while at McMaster would only be $10,080. So it's a significant difference in price and cost, and I think it would make Hamilton a lot more desirable for post-secondary students to come to, because the education is still great here. Plus you'd have an opportunity to save quite a bit of money and potentially live on campus or live in a neighboring city close by. When it comes to childcare, both cities offer great options. I do find the wait for Toronto childcare to be a little bit longer than Hamilton. And the good thing is that both cities offer subsidy childcare. So if you're making low income, you could actually qualify for a portion, if not all of your childcare to be covered. Lastly, let's get into the difference in neighborhoods. So Toronto definitely has their share of homeless people and those that have significant low income. And what I find is the homeless people and low income people tend to be spread out throughout the downtown core, but there's also really impoverished communities within different areas within the Toronto area as well, such as like North York, Scarborough, Brampton, Mississauga. Like there's little clusters of areas that have those more low income people, and they usually live in like government housing. Whereas in Hamilton, I find those low income area homeless population to be really concentrated in one specific area, and that's that downtown core. So I find with Toronto, you might have a little bit more options in terms of like those affordable housing for those people, but it's really spread out, and you really have to do your research to make sure you're moving to an area that you feel comfortable living in. Whereas Hamilton, you know, we have majority of our population that's homeless or impoverished living in a specific area. So it's a really big difference that you want to take into account. Another thing to take into account is that the Toronto area is definitely very multicultural and has different areas that actually have more of a cultural element to it. So there's like Greek Town, there's Little Italy, there's like a Caribbean area, there's places for people who are Indian, Hindu to go to. So that's something that is pretty segregated in different areas of Toronto, but overall Toronto is very, very diverse. Hamilton, we don't have those little towns or little areas that are specifically for people of certain cultures and ethnicities, but Hamilton, I would say overall is pretty diverse and pretty mixed in when it comes to different cultures and backgrounds. So one thing that a lot of people don't realize with Toronto and Hamilton is that both downtown cores have one-way roads. It's so interesting. I think because of both cities kind of being quite older, they both have those one-way roads, which could be a little bit tricky to navigate, but I just find that to be really interesting. Both cities have areas that are growing at a rapid pace. There's a lot of new developments that are happening in terms of commercial space, retail, master plan communities, condo markets that are just exploding left, right, and center. And that's to help meet the demand of new immigrants that are coming here and people who are just looking to buy. So I think both areas are growing at a great rate. I do find Toronto is growing a little bit faster, and that's probably because majority of the new immigrants that come to Ontario tend to migrate to Toronto first, and then once they're here for a few years, they sometimes decide to go to other areas. As promised, since you stayed till the end, I'm going to give you 3 differences between living in Toronto versus living in Hamilton that no one will tell you. And the first is that I find Toronto drivers to be a lot more aggressive. So whenever I'm driving, especially in the downtown core, sometimes it's a little difficult to get into a next lane, and the taxi drivers, Uber drivers, I find to be a lot more aggressive than in Hamilton, where people are a little bit more laid back. So that's one of the big difference when it comes to driving in both cities. Second is for those that love to go shopping. So I do find that Toronto has a lot more malls than Hamilton. So Hamilton has the Lime Ridge Mall, we have Jackson Square, a few different like shopping plazas and districts, but in Toronto, I do find that there's a lot more malls. So you have Yorkdale Shopping Mall, you have Eaton Centre, Fairview Mall. So there's a lot more larger malls within the Toronto area than in Hamilton. And the third is, I think something that a lot of people want to know is, where are people the nicest? And it's interesting because I find that there's amazing people in both cities. I think just the challenge with Toronto, especially in the downtown area, is that because it's such a fast-paced environment, people really move and have that attitude of, I need it now, I want it now. So when I used to work in the service-based industry, our managers actually prepared us for that and trained us that people in the downtown Toronto area are very, very used to a fast pace of living. So they need answers right away. They need to be cashed out quicker. So that's just something to keep in mind, is just, you know, that fast-paced mindset of, I need it now, I got to get on to the next thing. Whereas in Hamilton, I find people, you know, live at a bit of a slower pace and are probably slightly more kinder in a sense, but both area has great people. So if you're interested in knowing more specifics about neighborhoods in Toronto, be sure to check out my video here. And if you're interested in knowing more about neighborhoods in Hamilton, check out my video here. And that's it. Hopefully you got a ton of value from watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, turn on post notifications. Thanks for watching and have a wonderful day.